Hello everybody, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I really do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff that's been going on throughout the world and a ton of stuff especially inside the country of Ukraine. There's been a lot of interesting developments over the last 24 hours, and unfortunately a lot of this stuff in general is not good. The world, when it comes to the news, generally speaking, is pretty dark and depressing. But luckily, you guys have built an awesome community here and allow us to be the community that can give back. We're the news that gives back. We give back directly to the news stories that we talk about every single night, and it's only through your guys' support. The way that we end up doing this is actually by, if you check out the video description below, and you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there. All of them, 80% or more of the donations that they receive actually go to their programs and helping people, with only about 20% actually going to the salaries and administration's costs. So we try to keep the controversy out of here. We're here to help people, not necessarily just pay salaries or anything. And if you have any more, you're going to find our Discord in the link below as well. And please jump onto the Discord. One, to come and join the community as well, but more importantly than that, so that way you can get in touch with a staff member. Because if you can get in touch with a staff member, shoot us a link, shoot us a short description. We want to add more. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing merchandising. 100% of everything that we do is 100% for charity and to help people affected by the very crises we talk about every single day. So please continue that support. Please continue to support these organizations. You guys have been amazing thus far. I can't speak highly enough on it. And the support that you've given them and given us, it's amazing to see. There's 130 subscribers thus far, and it's been amazing. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, and that's okay too, you can like and subscribe and let your friends know about us, because growing this community, the more people that see these videos, the more people that join us in this community, overall, the more of an impact we'll have as a community as well. We want to be able to actually put fundraisers on every single stream that we do every night that we're streaming live. And the way that we're able to do that is by having quite a large community here. We want to be able to raise $1 million. That's our first goal when it comes to the stream. So if you guys could help us do that, that would be very much appreciated. So we're getting ready to roll right into the news here, but before we do, please feel free to @ me in the chat if you guys are watching this live, and I will answer your questions and comments to the best of my ability. A little bit of a background on myself. I was an 0352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps. I served between 2016 and 2020 with 2 rotations, both of them to the Middle East, specifically Syria and Iraq. So I specialize in anti-armor warfare, utilizing the Javelin, and the TOW system, as well as light anti-armor weapons, the AT-4 and the likes of that. But I was also, of course, a basic infantryman. I was fully cross-trained in machine gunnery. I conducted mounted operations. I did all sorts of stuff. So I can, those are my specialties. I'm a subject matter expert in anti-tank warfare and tank doctrines, armored doctrines. So please feel free to ask me any questions or comments. A lot of this stuff can be very confusing, and I will try to explain it in the most simple ways I can. That way you guys can have a better understanding about exactly what it is we're talking about with these different situations throughout the globe. But with that, we're going to go ahead and roll right into the news. And of course, we start off here in Ukraine. So the first thing we have is a little bit of a downer, and that is the child casualty update. Every so often, the Prosecutor General's Office or the Ukrainian Commission for Human Rights actually releases a bunch of information regarding child casualties and children which are missing. And today we get yet another one of those from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 376 children have died. 733 have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. And that does make sense considering where the majority of the war has taken place, especially since the launch of the Donbass counteroffensives, or the Donbass offensives in the second phase of this war thus far. It's been a rather terrible time for all of the civilians there, And a lot of these civilians did not evacuate, not nearly as many as what would have evacuated from the north and central parts of the region. The reason being is these people have been living in a war zone for the past 8 years. The people that live in Donetsk and the Luhansk regions, they have been in these areas where fighting between separatist and Ukrainian forces has been ongoing since 2014. In their minds, they have seen war. They know what this is like, and they thought that they were prepared for it. However, it doesn't matter what experience you may have. If you're a veteran like myself and served overseas, or if you're an individual who has lived in a region with immense conflict over the last 8-10 years, then I hate to say this to you, but this war is nothing like any of that. This war is not like the war on terror, and this war is not like what has happened, in any kind of a conflict since really World War II. These are two first world industrialized nations killing each other in a war of attrition. It is one of the bloodiest wars to be fought in the 21st century, and is absolutely devastating as a civilian. There's a scorched earth policy when it comes to the Russians, a lack of rules of engagement, and that means horrendous war crimes on a scale that is probably only rivaled by the Holocaust is occurring in this country. If you are a civilian, do not stay. I understand for a lot of people that's very difficult. It's easier said than done when you're talking about people's entire livelihoods, and you're talking about entire, this is where they grew up, this is where they were born, this is where their parents are from, their grandparents are there, but it's necessary. You can rebuild, but you cannot revive, and that's the situation ongoing here in this war zone. Ukraine, actually, in general, has an interesting bit of news here, and that's because Ukraine, it may be possible here in the very near future to explore destroyed cultural sites within Ukraine in 3 dimensions. Emmanuel Durand hopes he could offer the world a unique perspective on what's happening with some of the Ukrainian cultural sites. UNESCO verified 170 cultural sites that were damaged or destroyed since February. 25% of those are within the Kharkiv Oblast alone. And so this is actually being reported by abc.net, and it's pretty interesting. You can actually go and take a look in 3D these cultural symbols. Ukraine is an area of a lot of history. You're talking about thousands of years of history. It's in some cases tens of thousands of years worth of history within this entire region. It's quite significant. I'll shrink myself down here for you guys, so you can see this. I mean, it is crazy what they're able to do. So they're scanning these and they're putting it in 3-dimensional models that you can take a virtual tour of them, and we can just take a look at this one here. I mean, this is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. And you can see the amount of damage that has been done to these locations. It's absolutely immense. So, but it's pretty cool to see stuff like this. It's going to give you a very unique perspective onto the devastation of this war. We've seen the photographs, we've seen the videos, but to be able to kind of explore that a little bit firsthand, in a way, really will bring some of the gravity of this situation really to you, to make you understand, like, it's complete and utter destruction in many parts of this country on a scale that is, I cannot say unprecedented, but definitely is very uncommon. And that immediately begins to bring us into the Donbass. The Donbass and the Southern Front is really the meat and potatoes of the war. This is where the fighting is mainly ongoing, and this is where we're seeing the heaviest fighting throughout the entirety of the country. The Donbass is the main center stage, and when you're talking about this region, this is an area that has been fought over since 2014. Separatists, and which are backed by Russia, a relatively small group, and then you also have the Ukrainian military, which has been fighting here for a very prolonged period of time. We're coming up on 9 years almost at this point, and these are very static line defenses. In a lot of these regions, these are trench lines that have existed for quite some time. At the beginning of the war, we did not see a lot of offensives in this area because of those static defenses. It just wasn't a viable option. The concentration of Russian forces within this region just did not allow to be able to take these objectives without some kind of a unsustainable losses, and that's coming in Russian terms, and we've seen quite unsustainable losses throughout the duration of the war. But as we come up here, The Izium area has been fought over since the beginning of this offensive. The Russians were unable to secure their day one objectives during the offensive in the Donbass and have been stuck here. Units took a short tactical pause to rotate the immediate combat forces out after they took significant losses and completely crippled their combat effectiveness. Since then, the fighting has been extremely bitter within the Izium area between Ukrainians and the Russian forces. They have been fought to almost a stalemate, and it's nothing but a war of attrition. When you want to talk about a meat grinder, Izium is the perfect example. And what we see today is more fuel being added onto that fire as destroyed vehicles are located here that were recently destroyed just today. We see at least one Russian T-72 burning here in the field. And go ahead and take a look. And this is the perfect example of what we would call a catastrophic kill on this tank. Now, what does that mean for you? And to give you a little bit of an explanation. So what you see here, this is likely a T-72, which has been completely destroyed. What happens is when you hit a tank, really the first thing you're going to do is you're going to shoot at it probably with a machine gun or something, and that's going to cause all the troops to close their hatches. That you have a wide field of view when your hatches are open. You can see a lot around you. Closing your hatches narrows that. They have very small portholes that they can look through, and it makes visibility extremely difficult. That allows for an anti-tank team to then find an area to engage in relative safety and engage this target, whether it be with a javelin or a tow missile or any of the other Russian systems that they may have, or the Stugna P. And when this missile hits this tank, the Russian tanks, especially the newer ones, the T-72 on has what's called an auto-rotating carousel within them. They have ready ammunition, I believe it's about 20 rounds worth, in the bottom of the turret. It's in a cylinder. All of this ammunition is exposed. So when the missile hits the tank, it basically sends a copper jet through the armor of the tank. It's superheated. It's liquid metal, and it then sprays this liquid hot lava-like metal throughout the entirety of the tank and sets it on fire. This ignites the ammunition within inside the tank, and because it's all located in the center, what ends up happening is it explodes, and you have all of these rounds going every which direction they want to go, but it's inside of this tank. Not only does that kill the crew, but it causes the 9-ton turret, which is just sitting atop the tank based off of its own weight, to launch up into the air, and sometimes in upwards of over 200 feet if it's fully laden. It also sets off the fuel within the tank, and that causes what we would say a catastrophic kill. And that's where the Ukrainians are currently competing in the turret tossing contest here in Ukraine. And that is a pretty good entry. Of course, we get our daily Donetsk update from Pavel Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And Pavel Krylenko says here that Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August 24th. 3 people were killed and one citizen was injured. Pavel Krylenko has given us quite a lot of information throughout the duration of this war and continues to update us pretty much daily regarding what's happening within his jurisdiction here in the Donetsk Oblast. The Donetsk Oblast specifically is seeing some of the heaviest fighting of the war thus far, especially in areas such as Bakhmut, Soledar, Seversk, and all the way down to Toretsk, as well as Pisky in the south, just on the outskirts of the city of Donetsk itself. It seems that another successful Ukrainian strike has occurred here in Horlivka. Horlivka has been struck several times over about the past week, and it seems that there's a lot of logistical depots here inside of Horlivka. One of them was inside of a styrene plant just on the outskirts of the city. Currently, it was reported to be used as a Russian logistical hub. It's a large warehouse and facility, meaning they can bring a lot of ammunition and such into there. At this point, they're saying that a main power transformer has been destroyed and is on fire, as well as the rooftop of the building itself. And we have not only a photo, but also a video of this event at this point. So as you can see, the fire coming off of that building. And here's the video for you guys. So obviously quite a significant fire ongoing there at that styrene plant there in Horlivka. As you jump over here down to Donetsk, here this is the city of Pisky. Pisky was actually hit with TOS-1As and a heavy shelling of heavy artillery shellings. Specifically the TOS-1A with the usage of thermal barrack munitions. Just on the outskirts, this is just on the outskirts of the city of Donetsk and over by the Donetsk International Airport, which has been out of commission really since 2014. The city of Pisky, what was left of it anyway, was completely destroyed in the Russian bombardments, and we start to see an up-close version of that. While we did have drone footage of the actual strikes before, we see now this is a Russian state-run news organization embedded with Russian forces at the front lines, and they're surveying the damage of the recently occupied Pisky. So go ahead and take a look.
Вся территория песок засыпана лепестками, с которой проходят, разминируют, но ночью опять засыпаются. Вот с этого коровника, как вы видите, вот сеть окопов начинается и идет в дома, в которых они себе обустраивали стрелковые позиции. Слышите, сейчас работает артиллерия противника. Идем очень внимательно, смотрим под ноги, ступаем след в след. Здесь на земле еще более-менее их заметно. Вот там дальше трава будет. В траве их вообще невозможно заметить.
Something interesting to point out, one of the main things that Russia has been talking about over, I'd say about the last month, that is really something they have focused in on, is the usage of cluster munitions. Now, the Ukrainians and the Russians both use cluster munitions. We know this because neither of them are signatories of the Ottawa Agreement, which is what bans cluster munitions as well as the self-triggering landmines. Neither country is a signatory of this. However, we have only known the Russians to use them. They're the only ones we have footage of using cluster munitions, and we know that they have used them throughout the duration of this war. And not only that, but we also have a precedent before the war of them using them in places such as Aleppo and Idlib back in 2016 when they bombed these areas pretty much into oblivion in Syria. So we do know that the Russians not only use them, but are very willing to use them in highly concentrated civilian populations, which violates Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, which require a commander to use a means or method that is not an indiscriminate attack, 1, and 2, that minimizes possibility of civilian casualties and collateral damage. That is why, but the Russians know this as well, and that's why they're honing in on these. They consider these the butterfly mine, and they say that the Ukraine is dropping them all over Donetsk and the Donbass in order to cause civilian casualties. However, Ukraine, until very recently, was in control of Pisky. There was no point in dropping cluster munitions on their own troops in Pisky, and the only ones that we know to have been heavily shelling Pisky is the Russians, meaning that it's very likely that the Russians themselves have dropped these cluster munitions, as we do know that they have them within their arsenal. Something that has recently been reportedly confirmed by the Associated Press was that the Russians currently have Iranian kamikaze drones. While it was heavily stated that the Russians would not be going to Iran, they recently went to Iran as well as Putin himself in order to talk with the Iranians about whatever. It was heavily hypothesized that they were actually going there to purchase Iranian drones, specifically kamikaze drones, to counter things like the Switchblade, which they have seen very effective against their forces within Ukraine by the Ukrainian troops that have been given them by coalition partners. And at this point, the Associated Press is considering this confirmed. We actually do have that AP News article for you. And this will actually complicate the nuclear deal quite significantly, as there is currently that nuclear agreement that's trying to be, they're trying to secure with Iran to limit their ability to gain nuclear weapons. Iran is very close. I don't know if they're technically allies, but they are very close friends with Russia. Russia and Iran are very close friends, and so this is kind of an unsettling fact that Iran would be supplying weapons. But it's not it's not something that would be crazy to think about, as Iran has been illegally smuggling weapons into Yemen to fight the Saudis for quite a significant amount of time, and also has been backing pretty much every terrorist organization in the Middle East just with the purpose of killing coalition forces and to continue their kind of political aspirations within the region. Proper PPE, personal protective equipment. This is something the Russians lack. In fact, one of the hypothesized reasons why Russia has not declared a general or at least partial mobilization of their population is because it's a question as to whether or not the Russians could logistically handle it. The Russians currently really have never had great logistics. The last time their logistical capabilities were really quite significantly clear is actually during World War II, and that's because the United States Lend-Lease Act supplied them with an immense amount of materials and equipment, to include a lot of logistical vehicles, GMC trucks, that allowed them to continue that war effort in a meaningful fashion. We see complete logistical breakdowns throughout the rest of the Soviet Union's history and into, of course, following Russia, which you can controversially say is still the Soviet Union at this point. But the thing is that they probably don't have the stuff to supply their troops. We've seen all types of weaponry and equipment being used. We've seen Soviet-era equipment being used quite heavily. Of course, that is the majority of the Russian stock. But when we're talking about that equipment, we're talking about stuff that has been completely obsolescent and outdated since, the 60s, which is not good. I'm not talking large vehicles. I'm talking your plate carriers. I'm talking about your helmets. I'm talking about the very basic thing that an infantryman needs. We also know that many of them do not have optical sights on their equipment or are reliant on iron sights, giving them a distinct disadvantage from most Ukrainian troops that are currently being continuously supplied optics and ever improving their chances of successful engagement against Russian infantry. And that's what we see here. This is what a plate inside of a Russian plate carrier is like. Just take a look at its effectiveness. I can tell you right now, it ain't very good.
Броня сила, да?
Ні, це реально треба, щоб побачили. Ось, подивіться. Сука, це бронеплита, блядь, російського солдата. Подивіться, це я не знаю, чи якогось пожежного щита зігнуто. Це треш, шатіна. Воно щось ще й прописано, щось промарковано. Ось, дістав їхнього бронежилета. А другий, а ну давай другу дістанемо. Так, те саме. Дивіться, блядь. Дивіться на цю другу армію світу. От що воно, нахіра?
Ти насквозь просто.
Воно пофарбоване.
Ну старались, фарбувалися.
Ну дивись.
Ну те держить.
Те да.
Давай. З 5,45, звичайно.
А давай тепер дві разом.
Так, наскрізь, даже без цього.
Правда, да, от хлопці кажуть, хуйово бути орком, подивіться, блядь, з чим їх відправляють. Шиються, звичайно, 5.
If you were wearing that and you got hit with anything other than a pistol round, you're dead. It's a comfort item. It's not effective. It's a comfort item. It makes you. Young men in war, generally speaking, have an invincibility complex. I hate to break it to you. I know I certainly did I had an invincibility complex. I felt like nothing could stop me. There's nothing that could hit me. I wasn't going to be the one, like there's no way that could happen to me. And it seems that the Russians, of course, probably have that as well, and they're probably playing off of it a little bit, but it's not effective body armor. It's not. And you know that their vest itself, the actual plate carrier, probably isn't ballistic either, because most of the time I've never seen ballistic fabric actually rip that easily. And I have some. So, I mean, that's the fact of the matter, is it probably shouldn't rip that easily if it's any kind of a ballistic weave fabric, with just your standard knife, right? Maybe some raptor shears or something, it's a really sturdy, cutting equipment, but not your average hunting knife, which is what this guy's carrying. And a pistol round, probably a 9mm. Most steel plates are going to stop that. Soft plates will stop that. These are hardened steel plates, and they don't stop what they're actually meant to, which is a rifle round. So, and if a rifle round is going to go through, a lot of types of shrapnel are going to go through as well. So you're not really safe against really anything at that point. So that's, if you're a Russian, I hate to break it to you, but you're probably going to get killed because your body armor doesn't even work. Also, go home. But that is but that kind of tells you the Russian logistics. That's not the only thing. We've seen T-62s. We see, really outdated. We've seen Mosin Nagants, being used. We've even seen a T-34 tank, T-34-85, which was being used as a roadblock. We've seen Maxim machine guns from World War I. We've seen all sorts of equipment being used throughout the duration of this war, primarily by the Russians, some by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were using Maxim machine guns, but not for frontline use. They're training guys on the machine guns because a Maxim machine gun is great to train on. Slow rate of fire, and it doesn't consume nearly as much ammunition. As a result, it's still a machine gun. You can get the basics of machine gunnery down, and if in a pinch, same thing with the Mosin Nagant. It's a great rifle. Proved amazing in World War I, proved amazing in World War II. However, it's the 21st century, and the AK-47, not even the AK-74, just the AK-47, guys, is unbelievable. Every terrorist in the world has an AK-47, and you can't scrape enough of those together as the inventors of the weapon system to actually supply forces. That is questionable at how much more Russia can really do. So Yale has actually identified, as well as the Department of State, filtration camps that are located throughout occupied parts of Ukraine, specifically the Donetsk Oblast. Quite a significant number of them. For those that don't know, the filtration camp system, or filtration point system, is quite terrible. It was used heavily during the First and the Second Chechen Wars, and its main purpose is to filter individuals that would be enemies of the state throughout the population. In reality, however, it is essentially a concentration camp. Filtration camps, they have been, under the International Criminal Court, have been prosecuted, and people have been found guilty because in a filtration camp, you're talking about deprivation of sanitation, of sleep, of food, of water. You are talking about systematic beatings, systematic rape, systematic torture. You're talking about summary execution. You're talking about falsified detainment. You're talking about all sorts of things. It violates so much of the Geneva Convention. It essentially violates the entirety of the 1948 Geneva Convention, put in place specifically to avoid a Holocaust-like situation, and yet the Ukrainians themselves find them in these, including arbitrary arrest. So that is kind of what's happening inside of these filtration camps. If you don't believe me, please go read about it. A quick wiki Google search is going to impress you amazingly on what these things are. And it's terrible. Penal Colony number 52 is an amazing example. Rubizne, we know, is a pretty good example of what's happening there. And of course, anything that you've ever read about Chechnya. But the Conflict Observatory from the Humanitarian Research Lab at Yale did identify these, and they have listed all of them for us to see, the ones that they have identified. So far, they have identified, it looks like 13 of them. Bezemin, Dokochevsk, Kozatsky, Manhush, Nikolsky, Vasilivka, Donetsk, Makivka, Novozovsk, Starobeshiv, Buhas, Olenivka, Bakhmut Rayon, and the Olenivka and the Volnovka Rayon. So that is what you're talking about, and they actually kind of go through. They have different types. You have detention, holding, registration, and holding, registration, holding, secondary interrogation, registration, secondary interrogation, registration, secondary interrogation, and detention. All of these camps pretty much detain individuals. They are torturing people. They're executing people. It's a concentration camp. If you're Ukrainian, there's essentially no difference. This once again builds on to the whole, is this a genocide? Is this, ethnic cleansing? Is this crimes against humanity? Once again, you cannot have this many war crimes perpetrated in a single instance, over such a short period of time and not consider this as it's past the level of a tragedy. There is a point in which I would say, Ukraine's a tragedy. It's an example as to why war should not be fought on an industrialized scale in the 21st century. I think war is a very terrible thing. I think it's something that probably should never happen. But two countries killing each other, two industrialized nations killing each other in a war of attrition is a tragedy. I would even declare, some of these villages that were wiped off the face of the earth. I would say that those are tragedies and unfortunate collateral damage of a war. Even the Geneva Convention understands collateral damage. War crimes, however, on this scale, the arbitrary detention, forced deportation of individuals, the torture, rape, execution of individuals, the immense amount of pillaging, the usage of incendiary munitions in highly concentrated civilian populations, the indiscriminate attacks, the lack of means and methodology to limit collateral damage, the willingness to target civilian infrastructure. Every Geneva Convention covers medical units, denial of humanitarian aid, denial of basic rights, and preventing refugees from fleeing. All of these things stack up to genocide. I believe that Ukraine is unfortunately a genocide done poorly. That is kind of the standpoint that we have taken here. For those that don't know, while we try and stay apolitical on a lot of stuff and try to stay unbiased, there is in no way, shape, or form that we as a channel, which we have formulated on our own, we're not just trying to ride the train here, but after seeing everything we've seen, which you as a viewer see about 10 to 25% of that, there's no way with any kind of a moral compass that we at all could back Russia. There is no way, shape, or form in which case I could back the Russian Federation. I thought I had seen it all when I went to Syria, and God, I have not. I had not. I have never seen such cynical, destructive, violent, brutal. You can't describe it. You can. There's only one word to describe it, and it had to be coined as a result of the Holocaust, and that word is genocide. There's no way that that we as a channel could possibly back Russia and anything that they say. Once again, here's the official Department of States, and this is their official release regarding accountability for war crimes and other atrocities within Ukraine. So they did release the report, and they are backing Yale's research lab, as they did do this in conjunction with each other. So the United States recognizes the need for documentation, verification, and dissemination of information regarding the actions of the Russian government. As such, the United States Department of State will fund the Conflict Observatory with an additional $9 million to the European Democratic Resilience Initiative. This focus on accountability lays the foundation for the future of civil and criminal legal processes, whether in Ukraine or through international mechanisms or in third-party countries that have established jurisdiction. And that's in reference to the Rome Statute. Jump down here to Mariupol. Mariupol has been turned into a hellscape. And not just because of the war itself. Mariupol was already hell on earth, if there ever was one. But what we see is a very apocalyptic view of the city, as it has been engulfed in flames. What is left of Mariupol is on fire as we speak. There's no infrastructure to put it out. There is no fire department. There are no firefighters. There is nobody coming to help you. If you are trapped inside of Mariupol, then you're going to watch whatever is left burn. At this point, the whole city is covered in smoke and flame, and we are not sure as the casualties, as we are very unclear of most information inside of the city as is, but go ahead and just take a look.
Кошмар, там вообще уже ничего не видно. И дальше. Ветрюганище просто ужасный. Это вообще, это пипец какой-то.
So, Mariupol at this point is on fire. We're not quite sure as to the extent of those damages, but we do know that it is probably very, very severe. Heavy winds are fueling the fire right now and causing it to spread rather rapidly as the conditions allow for it. And in different news out of Mariupol, the occupational government has officially installed their very first traffic light inside the city. However, locals have reported that it's already broken. It's already broken. Of course. As you can see, that is the brand new traffic light, and it's busted. It's not working. Keep in mind, they're worried about traffic lights, but most of these people don't have medicine. They don't have medicine. They don't have food. They don't have water. The water there is pooled in shell craters that is contaminated with whatever puddles of human being are left underneath the rubble. To have survived the Battle of Mariupol is probably a worse fate than being killed in it. By quite a large margin, I would say. And while we did talk about how there is essentially a concentration camp outside of Nikolsky, we do see that we do see a Ukrainian flag flying very high over the city of Nikolsky. As I had talked about a little bit yesterday, the fact of the matter is that there is a ton of partisan activity behind the Russian lines, and they are doing a lot of stuff. They have sabotaged communication networks and logistical infrastructure. They've assassinated high-level targets. They are killing Russian troops. They're causing all sorts of havoc behind the lines, most of which we never hear about, and we will not hear about it until after these areas have been liberated. But what we do know is that in many areas of Ukraine, including here in Nikolsky, that are currently occupied, there is a movement to fly Ukrainian flags over these Russian-held territories. So we can actually see that flying high right here, very deep behind enemy lines here in Ukraine. Go ahead and take a look. And at this point, we can move up here, and we see a couple of different things happening. The first one is actually here. Absolutely mind-blowing skills from these pilots. Ukrainian pilots, I am extremely impressed. Now, I love the idea of flying. I do not have my pilot's license. I've always wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I thought it would be absolutely cool. These guys make me want to do it even more. And they're flying what's called Nap of the Earth. Nap of the Earth means that you are in and amongst, trees and buildings and everything else. It's the lowest level of flight for a helicopter. You're literally flying amongst these terrain obstacles in order to kind of shield yourself. It takes very skilled pilots to do it, especially at this speed. And what appears to be even more skillful is they are so low that at least at this point we can say that they've probably flown underneath power lines as well. Which, by the way, if you clip one of those, you're dead, like in a helicopter. You're done. You're done. So exceptional flying skills. We've seen exceptional flying skills from the Ukrainians throughout the duration of this war. I cannot talk highly enough at the skill of these pilots. But we can go ahead and take a look at some of these. Now, it may be an optical illusion, but I don't think so. Take a look. Now that right there, that's how you fly a helicopter. That's some skill. And so they're claiming this is an optical illusion in some ways because it's on a very steep hill. But it's I don't know. Either way, it's very low. Still very impressive by the pilots regardless. So Charlton Brook says that I imagine the partisans are booby-trapping the flags. And that's in reference to the one that we saw in Nikolsky. Yeah, I can imagine that. We see them booby-trapping all sorts of things. We see them also, car bombing people, which is quite impressive. They literally are assassinating like high-level occupational government officials inside of these regions by planting bombs in their car. It's pretty impressive. And we see a Gepard on the prowl. Now, a Gepard is, or the Flakpanzer Gepard is an anti-aircraft platform, or an AAP. It means it's a mobile anti-aircraft gun. It does have an actual dual-mounted anti-aircraft guns attached to it, as well as missile capability. And these are donated from Germany, and some of the heavy weaponry that's been given to Ukraine by Germany, and they're anticipating these to be further sent. This is the very first one that we have seen in service inside of Ukraine since these were originally promised. And for those that are kind of interested, Gepard means cheetah in German. We can go ahead and take a look at this. So there it is. That is a Gepard. And you can see it has its own built-in radar system, so it can independently acquire targets. It doesn't need a command and control center. It's all within the vehicle, and it has standard anti-aircraft guns on board it. It's pretty cool, and you can see the pylons where they can end up mounting missiles as well. It's pretty cool. It's a really cool anti-aircraft platform. I had to study about it. I really don't want to disclose some of the stuff that it can do, but it's very effective, and we'll just leave it at that. But they're going out there, and they're working out the cheetah. But we jump up here, and we get into tonight's main topic, and the main topic of the last 2 days, and that is Chaplyne. Chaplyne is deep behind Ukrainian lines, and it was struck with reportedly 8 separate Russian missiles as of yesterday. It as we called it here yesterday, it's the Independence Day massacre. At the time, it was estimated that about 15 people had been killed and another 50 had been injured. Unfortunately, that death toll has risen. At the strike on the railway station so far the casualties have increased to 25 people have been killed, among them 2 young boys, one 6 years old and one 11 years old. They were playing at their home when a Russian rocket actually ended up striking next to them. So, quote, Russian occupiers shelled passenger cars at the Chaplyne station in the Dnipropetrovsk region on August the 24th. 25 people were killed, including 2 children. 31 citizens were injured. The rescue operation was finished, and that's coming from Kyrilo Tomashenko, who's the deputy head of the president's office. This is one of the deadliest strikes on civilians thus far. The railway head was struck as Ukrainian civilians were attempting to flee from the Donbass, and most of those train cars are completely destroyed and burnt to a crisp. It's quite horrific what has happened here, and we do have some of the imagery coming from this as well. A lot of this came in today as they are trying to pull some of this away and try to clearing the tracks.
А що тобі? А тобі синок лежить. Хозвиту. Менше.
Ось його ми селилися.
В домі був, це його викинули. Ми там розвалля шукали, це все, а він тут лежав. Ніхто не знав, що він тут лежить. Ніхто не знав. Думали, може на кришу викинули, а оказується, ось він тут. Якби з самого початку час. Час він тут лежав, ніхто не знав, що він тут лежить.
Звука ніякого не було. Взагалі навіть не чути ніякого звука.
Some of these impact craters are as deep as 5 to 10 meters. These are extremely large ordnance that was dropped on a highly concentrated civilian population. Once again, violating Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions adopted in 1977. This is coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine. Yesterday, Russia launched 8 missiles at Chaplyne village in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The attack killed 25 people, including kids, and more than 30 were injured. And that is the very iconic photo at this point of the attack. The United Nations projects inside of Ukraine also spoke on this. He said, today in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, I could see firsthand the tragic consequences of the 6 months of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This war continues to cause countless deaths and suffering. I reinforce the UN's commitment to do all that we can to support people whose lives have been torn apart. And that's coming from Denise Brown, the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine. The United Nations projects have so far been unable to reach any of the occupied areas, even with humanitarian aid. They have been struggling throughout this entire duration of this war, and continue to do so, though they continue to attempt it nonetheless tirelessly. In the 6 months since Russia's invasion, Ukrainians have continued to see their loved ones killed, injured, and traumatized, their families separated, and their homes and schools and hospitals attacked. Once again, coming from Denise Brown. And so that is the very solemn update that we have regarding Chaplyne and the situation that has occurred there. However, it was a very successful Independence Day for the Ukrainians as they struck very hard at Russian forces across the entirety of the nation. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 2 Russian ammunition depots and 2 enemy military facilities, bases, or 2 enemy military bases in the Zaporizhia, the Luhansk, and the Kherson regions on August the 24th. And that's coming from Operational Command South. You also see that Ukraine shot down several UAVs over yesterday. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine shot down 4 Russian UAVs on August the 24th. And that's coming from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And we do actually have some of their official Twitter stuff regarding these. We can see one of those being shot down here. And this is an image that they have released. As well as this. An image of one of these UAVs that was brought down apparently with electronics warfare equipment. And the Ukrainian city of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, who said that the city has been practically without gas for a month, and that the Russian reports that a pipeline was being built from the coastal town of Berdyansk is simply not true. As of right now, the mayor of occupied Melitopol is calling on civilians to evacuate before winter comes, as many of them may freeze to death with the lack of basic necessities within the area. Jump up here to Enerhodar, where Zelensky has said that a nuclear accident was very narrowly avoided today. The last 4 power lines that are currently supplying the nuclear power plant were briefly cut today after shelling caused a fire at a local coal power station. That is the one that supplies the plant. The backup power was turned on to avoid a nuclear meltdown. Now we can see the network connectivity drop. This is coming from netblocks.org, which tracks internet usage and internet connectivity throughout the entirety of the globe. They have done a lot of stuff here, but this is from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant here in Enerhodar, and you can see that the entirety of the connectivity actually ends up dropping to 0 today as that electrical line was cut. The nuclear power plant has been completely disconnected from the grid for the first time in history per Energoatom, which is the Ukrainian basically state-run nuclear organization, nuclear power organization, coming from the Kyiv Independent. Once again, Zelensky, Russia has brought Ukraine and the rest of Europe on the edge of nuclear disaster. Zelensky said that Ukraine is doing everything possible to avoid catastrophe at the Russian-seized Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's not the only developments. Images published by Sentinel-2, which is a satellite image, or which is a satellite that's currently in space, shows a fire within the vicinity of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. You can take a look at that here. You can see those fires raging down there. And not only that, but it's also shown with satellite imagery that Russian military equipment is parked nearly 100 meters from the reactors, once again showing that Russia is indeed using the nuclear power plant as a shield for its military operations and is currently using it as a military base, and something that violates international law. You can take a look at that here. There you are. Those are Russian armored personnel carriers and cargo vehicles next to reactors 4, 5, and 6 here at the nuclear power plant, as recorded from the 21st of August here on right here on satellite footage. We've also seen drone footage and footage from inside the facility where we know that they are housing logistical vehicles with clear invasion markings right there inside of one of the reactor generator rooms. Come over here into the Kherson Oblast where we hit the Antonovsky Bridge. They're pontooning across the bridge, or across the river here, as the Antonovsky Bridge and the bridge over at Novokokhovka are destroyed. At this point, they're attempting to build a pontoon across the river. The difficulty with that is the fact that the Dnipro is too fast flowing. It's quite an engineering challenge to build a bridge across the river that has this fast of a current, and it's something that the Russians are having difficulties as well. This is why we haven't seen any pontooning across the Dnipro throughout the duration of the war, and why there was quite a significant amount of hesitation to strike at these bridges by either side to successfully destroy them. We can actually see that here. That's not the only very telling thing in this video, however, and we'll get to that here in a second.
Думаю, что со временем, в принципе, у нас заработали непосредственно и баржи. Мы их специально поставим таким образом, чтобы по ним можно было в реверсном формате двигаться.
This is the other telling thing. What is this? Well, this is using people as a shield. If you notice, there's a lot of different vehicles here. But there's one big one that just doesn't, one of these things just doesn't belong here. Yeah, that would be this one that's clearly marked with invasion markings. They're not, so they have to ferry troops and equipment and supplies across this river now. This bridge is totally worthless to them, and they've used some military boats and they've made themselves a ferry, and they're loading it with civilians and military personnel together. So that way, those military vehicles, you can't strike the ferry because you're going to kill civilians with it. Even if it has valid military targets on it, you're going to cause a lot of civilian casualties if you do it. This is quite literally using people as a human shield. Once again, just like we see it in Zaporizhzhia, the Geneva Convention, do not locate your military forces in and around highly concentrated civilian populations in order to mitigate collateral damage and danger and risk to the civilian population. The Geneva Conventions, guys, it's not hard. It's basically just have some kind of morals. Like, common sense dictates don't kill civilians. Don't put civilians in harm's way if you can. But even though they are pontooning across this bridge, Fair, also known as Kaysen, who is in the chat as a mod tonight, actually gave us a little bit of a joke, and it's knock knock, who's there? Hi who? Hi Mars, because they are already apparently destroying this bridge, as locals are already reporting explosions tonight there at the Antonovsky Bridge. Very nice. So it's very likely that, much like any of the other attempts to pontoon across the river, I don't think Russia's going to do so well with the Antonovsky Bridge, especially considering it's well within range of Ukrainian artillery. We have an update here in the Dnipro Oblast, of course, and that is coming from Valentin Reznichenko, who's the head of the Dniprovitsk Regional Military Administration. He says that, quote, rocket attacks in the Dniprovitsk region on August the 25th, 8 people were injured, including 3 children. Local residential buildings were damaged. But that is actually... Oh, I almost missed one. Sorry, guys. We jump down here to Sevastopol, which is in Crimea. Now, something that the Russian Federation has worked on quite extensively, believe it or not, is actually their ability to conduct electronic warfare. There's a lot of things that were kind of guessed upon, and I think, well in all, we can say that we vastly overestimated the Russian capability. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't good at certain things. And something that we do know that they have quite a bit of infrastructure and quite a bit of logistics for is communications, and believe it or not, it's jamming them more so than sending them or receiving, but they can jam them. And we see that here. This is electronics warfare. We actually have this one geolocated. The geolocation is a little bit off. It actually puts it right about here, but it's in this open field. And this is right next to Sevastopol. The Russian forces have established a communications jamming array near Sevastopol in Crimea. This comes as Russian occupational forces has really witnessed the Ukrainians' expert ability to strike conduct deep strikes within this territory. And this is also immediately coming after supposedly a Russian headquarters within Sevastopol was actually hit with a kamikaze drone. So we actually see them setting up a communications or a jamming array here just outside of Sevastopol. So quite an interesting development there. To see some electronics warfare. We're seeing a little bit more of that today as both the Ukrainians brought down an Orlan-10 drone and we see the Russians setting up communications jamming equipment. And that's actually everything inside the country of Ukraine, but don't worry, we got plenty of other stuff outside the country of Ukraine that has to deal with the ongoing war. And of course, we start off with our international news up here in Russia, specifically starting in Moscow. And that's because it's the Russian military is boosting its recruitment numbers up to a 1.15 million man army. That's an increase of 137,000 troops. That is what they're currently looking for. After President Putin ended up rushing over to the Kremlin and the State Duma, or their parliament in Russia, even though it's really just a basically a yes man group for Putin. But the emergency meeting seems to have been very fruitful. He signed the decree today, increasing the number of servicemen in the armed forces of Russia to 1.15 million. The Institute for the Study of War, a very reliable source if you guys ever want to check them out, have reported saying that this decision is unlikely to generate significant combat power in the near future, and indicates that he is unlikely to order a mass mobilization anytime soon. One of the reasons why Putin wouldn't order a mass mobilization is because that now means that there is some controversial things being done. This is not a war. In order to conduct a mass general mobilization of his population, of the population of Russia, he has to declare it a war. That is what that's basically what is required. It has to be backed by the State Duma, and they have to vote for it, and then you're talking about a mass conscription of everybody. You do not want to mass conscript people from Moscow and St. Petersburg. The reason being is that is where most of your political base is, And this is where most of the people that are generally more privileged in Russia are. If you notice, recruitment for Russia is in other areas of the nation, areas generally considered much more poor. You're talking about Dagestan, you're talking about Siberia, where there is no real other type of opportunity for the Russians there, and they're not really afforded anything else. The Russians within these regions are quite, they're not treated as true Russians, whereas someone from Moscow, a Muscovite, would be treated a little bit differently and held in a little bit of a higher regard within the Russian Federation. But we can see, of course, the live UA map, which is something that's been heavily followed, actually has a picture of the decree here regarding that, and we can go ahead and take a look. But that is the decree for the Russian Federation here, and that they're bringing up their total to 1.15 million troops. And of course, here's that article from the study of the Institute for the Study of War. And they do bring up, they call it a backgrounder, where they cover everything happening inside of Ukraine in quite good detail. I think that they are a little bit delayed in that information, but their quality of information is also very, I think it's a lot better than some areas where others are kind of lacking in what's going on. But overall, good source if you guys want to check them out. We see more propaganda. This is coming from Solovey, Solyov, and he is a actor. He's a propagandist for the Russian Federation. He's on Russia One, which is a state-run news media channel, and he's saying that Russia is fighting a war against NATO. That's new, not really, but it's it's good to see, and it's for the survival of Russia too, and that the Russians have liberated over 10 million Ukrainians from the Nazi government. First of all, in order to be a Nazi, you have to be a National Socialist Workers' Party inside of Germany. That's what a Nazi is. That's what it stands for. So good on you. I think you just mean a fascist in general, or fascismo if it's in Italian, as it was actually a word created by Mussolini. And then you also have, liberated. You're not really liberating anything if you destroy it all, but okay. But here he is in all of his wonderful glory. Enjoy.
Идет война с НАТО. Война за выживание нашей страны. Мы не стали дожидаться 22 июня, решили наконец закончить 8-летнюю войну. За первые полгода проведения специальной военной операции с минимальными человеческими потерями, воюя менее чем 15% армии мирного времени, мы вывели из строя, по данным американцам, более 200 тысяч украинских нацистских военнослужащих. Это включает 200-е и 300-е тяжелые. Мы освободили 20 с лишним процентов территории Украины. Это территория, на которой легко может разместиться ряд европейских государств. Мы освободили около 10 миллионов граждан Украины от нацистской власти, что в процентном отношении даже больше, чем территория.
Okay, let's unpack some of that, if you can. So, alright, so, it's a war against NATO. You need to capitalize NATO, by the way. It's an acronym, not a word. It stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And by the way, William Young, amazing comment there. Hey, it's a crude Russian comedian. I 100% agree. Very fantastic comment, my friend. It's a war for our country's survival. Nobody threatened Russia, by the way. In fact, no one was aware that this was happening until pretty much the United States and the United Kingdom and several NATO allies all came together and said, hey, by the way, they're building up a massive army on your border late last year. It's about October or so. Let's see. We didn't wait for the 22nd of June. We decided to finally finish the 8-year war. So it's a war, by the way, guys. I didn't know that. It's a war, apparently. We didn't wait for the 22nd of June. Okay. To finish the 8-year war. Well, thank you for finally calling it a war. Over the first 6 months of the special military operation in Ukraine, Okay, so we're back to the propaganda. With minimal human losses, that's easy to declare when you don't repatriate your dead, and they're currently sitting in refrigerated containers. They're sitting in refrigerated train cars outside of Kyiv in the thousands. So very easy to say that. We're fighting with less than 50% of our peacetime army. I hate to break it to you, that's not true. You're fighting with pretty much your entirety of your active duty peacetime army and about 15% of your total forces, which is about 200,000 right now. According to the Americans, we've disabled more than 200,000 Ukrainian Nazi servicemen. Once again, none of the Ukrainians are part of the German National Socialist Workers' Party, so they're not Nazis. Also, the Nazi Reich was destroyed in World War II. You think someone who calls that the Great Patriotic War would know that. But more than 200,000 Ukrainian Nazi servicemen have been disabled. That seems like an absurdly high number. Even Ukraine doesn't declare numbers that high when it comes to Russian losses. And then we know that they're probably inflating those. That's including dead and wounded. Probably not. That's like the entirety of the Ukrainian military destroyed. The war would be over at 200,000 losses. It would be over. That's the entirety of the Ukrainian army fielded on day one of the war at full strength. We have liberated over 20% of the country of Ukraine's territory. Well, we can see that's not really true. You have not taken almost a fourth of the country. You could easily fit a number of European states into that territory, except they're all part of NATO, and you would get nuked. We have liberated around 10 million Ukrainians. You're occupying 10 million Ukrainians, deporting them forcefully, and then stuffing them in concentration camps, also known as the filtration system. And you're also scorched earthing their homes and burning them alive inside of them. They're liberating dead bodies is what they're doing. With the percentage terms, that's even more than the territory we've liberated. Not really. So there's your breakdown of Russian news propaganda. 20%. You're saying that they've taken a quarter of Ukraine. That would be like here. I'd say it'd probably be like a good 25% right there. So you're talking about like taking all the way up to like maybe Dnipro and Kharkiv. Yeah, they don't have that much land. Unless you count Crimea. In which case we should. In which case, yeah, okay, 20%. I can see that. So, yeah. The Russians, yeah. Can't... William Young says, just popped in my head, but curious if Operation Ozakhaivim was partially led to the Rashism or entirely unrelated. The Russian version of propaganda of Operation Paperclip, probably just conspiracy though. So why is NATO still a thing? What is NATO? And why are so many Western countries really do not like Russia? Well, I think the essential genocide of the Ukrainian people probably helps not like the Russian military and the government. The people, your average person in Russia is not a bad person. They're a human being just like me and you. I hate it when the term like orc is used and the people put Z's, for, basically like lightning bolts for the SS, and also because of the Z army and everything else. And I hate it when people do that. It's not the Russian people that are doing this. It's the Russian government and the Russian military. Make sure you make that distinction. I don't hate the Russians. I don't want anything bad to happen to the Russians. I just hate their military, and I want to watch their entire military just get wiped off the face of the earth, which Ukraine is doing quite well. But there is a lot of anti-Russian sentiments throughout the world, especially in other locations, and we'll get to a little bit of that here. But you have to understand, a lot of these places immediately following World War II, Poland hates the Russians. They do. They hate them. And you also have to understand that the Soviet Union, along with the Nazi Germany, jointly invaded Poland. They jointly invaded Poland. And then the Soviet Union, when they switched to the Allies, took all of Poland and then half of Germany, and then immediately turned them into communist states. These areas were brutally suppressed by Stalin. They were brutally suppressed by every member, or by every leader in every government under the Soviet Union. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, all of these countries. Yugoslavia, which then ended up turning into a number of countries once it fell. You're talking about a region where millions of people died at the hands of the Soviet Union. There's not a single person whose family's lives have not been touched by this within this region in some way, shape, or form. Lenin, Stalin, every leader of the Soviet Union, essentially, the Red Scare was a thing. The Russians were the Soviets were very clearly saying they wanted to take over everything. And they were building their military to do so. They did it from 1918, essentially 1917 under the Mensheviks, but from 1918 all the way to 1991, the Soviet Union spread this rhetoric, was building nuclear weapons, was purposely upholding dictatorships and stuff throughout the world, and was constantly threatening nuclear annihilation and the Mad Doctrine. Just because that happened, and just because the Soviet Union collapses, doesn't mean those sentiments go away. You don't erase 80 years of rhetoric overnight. The ideology between the Russians and the West is also very different. And then NATO expansion comes in, and the Russians are trying to talk about deals and things that, and statements that were made during the time of the Soviet Union, which is a country which no longer exists, and they're trying to uphold those as the Russian Federation. Other deals were signed in order to make sure that could be prevented, such as the newest non-proliferation treaty or non-nuclear proliferation treaty, stuff like that. And those have been signed since, because the ones with the Soviet Union are technically over with. The country doesn't exist anymore. But that is kind of the reason for these sentiments, why these anti-Russian sentiments are there. The Russians for years, for decades, 80 years, talked about they were going to take over everything, and everything would be Soviets. Everything with the almighty Russians and the Soviet Union, and the Reds are going to take over everything. And for years and years and years, they said, okay, NATO is being hostile. NATO is being hostile. The West is being hostile. Capitalism, sucks, and all this. And then the Soviet Union collapses, and everyone's like, okay, cool. Russia's going to be a democracy now. The democracy fails with the rise of Putin, and all of a sudden that rhetoric becomes true with the invasion of Georgia in 2008, with the invasion of Ukraine, beginning in 2014, and then the full-scale invasion beginning this year. So, why does a lot of the world not like the Russians? You can't say you're going to invade people and annihilate them for 80 years kind of die and then come back to life under a new name, and then immediately carry out your plans to take over the world, and then it not blow back in your face. And that's what the Russians have done. So I understand the sentiments, though I don't agree with them. And over here, we're seeing a dystopian nightmare inside of Russia. The Russians are singing the national anthem, which, by the way, this national anthem of Russia is the Soviet anthem. It was changed back by Putin. For those that don't know, Russia, between the rise of Putin and the fall of the Soviet Union, actually had a completely different anthem, specifically under Boris Yeltsin. But it's basically a dystopian nightmare here. So this is just outside of Moscow, in Podolsk, and this is a Russian, recruitment drive. And it's one of a few recruitment events that are happening across the country, and they're basically offering reduced sentences to prisoners if they go fight in the war in Ukraine, and the citizens are singing the national anthem of Russia as fellow citizen is being detained for protesting the war. It's crazy. Yeah. By the way, they're having military recruitment ads in elementary schools. Here's out of kindergarten. Isn't life just fantastic in Russia? Make sure to die for the motherland. It's insane. Why? What benefit is that here? It says no, they're not sending toddlers to war. Debatable. It's aimed at the fathers taking their kids home. That's so fucked up, man. And this is in the Kursk region. Here's one of those recruitment drives here in the Kursk region. They got bands playing and people talking, and this looks like it's a very well-off community, doesn't it? Crazy that they would be targeting people that have no other opportunity. It's the same methodology behind other places as well. North Korea, for instance. If you don't join the military in North Korea, you're going to starve to death. Because at least the state will take care of you if you're in the military. Make sure you have a bed of some kind. May not be good, but you'll have a bed. You'll at least get fed more than the average person. Because one thing somebody wants more is than to, they want to stay in power. And the military is how you can keep that power. Keep the military taken care of, they won't overthrow you. Kaysen says they slapped some asphalt in the middle and called it a town center. Yeah, no kidding, right? Advanced civilization. Yeah. Anyway, over here in Riga, an 80-meter tall Red Army monument has been destroyed. This is one of the largest monument that there is for the Soviet Union outside of Russia, and it's called the Liberators of Riga Monument. It was taken down as angry Russian protesters had gathered in the area. Masses of Latvians could be seen celebrating. Latvia's foreign minister said by taking down the monument, Latvia was closing another painful page of the history and looking for the better future. We actually have that from multiple angles. Here's this massive monument being toppled. There we go. So apparently, some of these Russian protesters got a little hostile with the police. Yeah, that usually doesn't end well for you. It doesn't matter what country you're in. If you start getting a little hostile with police officers, it really usually doesn't end well.
Почему кривославие нужно? Почему это кривославие нужно?
So needless to say, Latvia is really getting rid of a lot of those, as well as a lot of these other areas that were under the Soviet Union at one point, are getting rid of most of their monuments. They really don't want anything to do with the Soviet Union anymore. It's a very painful past for many of these places. I mean, thousands of people in each of these countries were killed by the Soviet Union, purged, it quite literally purged. And, you know, Ukraine's no exception either. You have such as the Holodomor, which is a terrible famine that killed millions. You know, it killed, I think it's like something like 200,000 alone in Kharkiv, I think, if I remember reading that correctly. And Latvia is no exception. There's also currently that Belarus has also destroyed grave sites of troops from Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia and Estonia, that they desecrated the graves of them and have destroyed their graveyard. So it's going both ways, and Russia and Belarus are really going to be the ones pushing that the West is doing this. They're both parties are committing this, and I don't blame the Latvians at all. I don't blame any of these people whatsoever. We jump over here, and this is up in Finland. The defense ministers of Finland, Sweden, and Norway went to deepen their cooperation. The defense ministers of the three Nordic countries, in a meeting in Finland today, discussed the impact of NATO accession process on the relations between Finland, Norway, and Sweden, as well as on the defense cooperation between those countries. Defense Minister Anita Kaikkonen said at a press conference that after the meeting, that all five Nordic countries plan to deepen defense cooperation. It's important, quote, "It's important to stick together in these times," Kekkonen said. The ministers also discussed the latest developments in the security situation in the territories adjacent to the region. According to the Swedish Minister of Defense, on one of the topics that was the strengthening of defense in the territories of Sweden, Norway, and Finland, located north of the Arctic Circle. And that allows us to move down here into the Middle East, where we have several major developments ongoing. The first one being that over here, this is between Hama and Masyaf, and in these areas, Israeli aircraft conducted airstrikes throughout these cities, apparently targeting Iranian formations once again, and we can see some of these here. Take a look at this photo for you guys. Some quite large airstrikes. This isn't the first time that Israel has conducted airstrikes inside of Syria. It's quite actually a common occurrence. As a result of the airstrikes, a Hezbollah ammunition depot was destroyed, and one of their research centers was also hit. 2 civilians were injured during the shelling, and a fire broke out at one of the impact sites. As you can see, some of those fires burning there for you guys. That's not the only thing. The U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Armed Forces under the Central Command once again targeted Iranian-backed militias within the Deir ez-Zor province. This comes as a significant uptick in kinetic engagements here within the Deir ez-Zor and Hasaka provinces of Syria, specifically around the Omar oil fields and the Conoco gas fields. They struck this time Iranian forces near the city of Katla, which is located in the Deir ez-Zor province, also known as Hatla. And this is the third incident within the last couple of days. We can see that here. It's quite impressive the amount of equipment they've brought to bear today. They did not release how many aircraft that they've used, but they brought in AC-130 gunships, an unspecified number of AC-130 gunships in Apache gunships. So they were tearing it up pretty good. They actually published a video from some of these strikes as well. So here's some ISR gunnery footage for you guys of what is happening there on the ground as of today. So you can see this is kind of a wide view, and that is them targeting some of these Iranian forces here. I do not know if this is them direct firing or if this is them designating targets. So, some cool ISR footage for you here. The United States Central Command of the U.S. Armed Forces say that 3 soldiers were injured during the shelling of American garrisons there in the Deir ez-Zor province. 2 are being treated in a hospital. The 3rd is already back within the ranks, so they were already retreated and released with light injuries. The others will likely have been flown back to at least Ramstein Air Base, or at least will be in the coming days. In response, the American helicopters destroyed 3 vehicles with launchers and eliminated several militants. And we have this. We do have this from the headquarters, United States Central Command, for immediate release. This is coming from Tampa, Florida. CENTCOM forces respond to attempted to coordinate rocket attacks at the Conoco Green Village bases in northeastern Syria. I can give you the general location, but I'm not going to give you the specific one. U.S. forces responded today to rocket attacks at 2 sites in Syria, destroying 3 vehicles and equipment used to launch some of the rockets. Initial assessments indicate that 2 or 3 suspected Iran-backed militants conducting one of the attacks were killed during the U.S. response. The attack began at approximately 7:20 p.m. local time in Syria, with several rockets landed inside the perimeter of the mission support site Conoco in northeast Syria. Shortly after, additional rockets landed in the vicinity of the mission support site Green Village. One U.S. service member with the mission support site Conoco was treated for minor injury and has since been returned to duty. 2 others are under evaluation for minor injuries. We are closely monitoring the situation, said General Michael Eric Kurilla, commander of CENTCOM. We have a total spectrum of capability to mitigate threats across the region and have every confidence in our ability to protect our troops and coalition partners from attacks. The U.S. forces used attack helicopters to respond. The response was proportional and deliberate. The United States does not seek conflict with Iran, but we will continue to take measures necessary to protect and defend our people. Additional details will be released and when they become available. So Iran, when I was in Syria back in 2017, 2018, Iran had roughly 70,000 fighters inside of the nation of Syria. Quite a significant number of them. That was the estimated amount. They smuggled them using Highway 1 that flows across southern Iraq from Iran and into the country of Syria. And they are supporting organizations, especially pro-Assad regime forces, militias that are in the area. This isn't the first time these areas have been attacked. They were also attacked on February 8th, 2018 with the help of roughly 300 members of the Wagner Group, a Russian mercenary organization, as well as pro-Assad militia troops, numbering several hundred as well. And they did shell these areas and received a very similar response. They were bombed for about 3.5 hours continuously. So these areas specifically, these facilities and U.S. personnel are very familiar with the situation ongoing there. As we jump just across the border here into Iraq, what we end up finding is that 3 Islamic State militants were killed during an Iraqi counterterrorism operation. This is happening in the Nineveh governorate within Iraq, and the military eliminated 3 militants of the Islamic State. Their accomplice, who supplied them with food, helped to get on the trail of the terrorists. He gave away their location of a hideout during interrogation. During a search at the site and of the clash, the security forces found weapons, IEDs, and communications equipment, which we do end up having photos of some of this here. And that allows us to bounce over here all the way over to Taiwan. And that is because Taiwan is sending 860 revolver drones to, or sorry, they're sending revolver 860 drones to Ukraine. They're sending roughly 800 of them, in fact. Taiwan is delivering these arms to the country of Ukraine through Poland. The number of drones delivered is unknown, but it's rumored to be up to about 800, like I said. Each of these weigh 42 kilograms or 93 pounds, and they can fly for about 40 minutes and up to 20 kilometers or 12 miles with a full payload. Their full payload is actually 8 60-millimeter mortars, but it can be customized for other munitions, and we can go ahead and take a look at that here. That's kind of terrifying. JL said, any ways that you can see to force Iran to stop smuggling drones to Ukraine? No, there is not. Without going into direct conflict with them, there's not. But I believe the chant in the 80s is the Ayatollah is Nasrallah. Yeah, that's very well needs to be brought back, I think. They have they're a theocracy. So they destabilize the region. Muqtada al-Sadr is heavily backed by them. They are really trying to dig their political claws deep into Iraq and destabilize the government in Iraq. The reason being is because right next to Iraq is, of course, Saudi Arabia. Iran and Saudi Arabia are different sectors of Islam. One is Shia, one is Sunni, which are 2 opposing groups that absolutely hate each other and have been fighting for thousands of years. And Iraq being in the middle and being weakened because of the war and the subsequent occupation, insurgencies in the Islamic State, it already has a very fragile, fairly new democracy, which we've seen what happens to new democracies. They're very easily hijacked. Once again, take just one hard look at Russia, and you can see what I'm talking about. You know, Boris Yeltsin, once he left and Putin came to power, it went downhill from there, and it became an authoritarian regime. Prior to 2003, Saddam Hussein was the head of the Ba'athist Party, which really kind of hones itself into Baathism is not a bad ideology in general, but it does tend to lend itself to authoritarianism. So that's why you see like Assad is Ba'athist. I believe he's the last Ba'athist leader in the Middle East, and he runs Syria. He's very much a dictator in Syria. Saddam Hussein was also Ba'athist. In fact, the Ba'athist headquarters is now the headquarters of CENTCOM inside the Middle East, I believe. They're in Baghdad. So, but Iran is just kind of a bunch of assholes. They are trying to destabilize the region. They're a theocracy. They're trying to spread that theocracy mindset. They heavily back anybody with, they see as an infidel, essentially. They train groups like Kataib Hezbollah, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps, or IRGC, goes into actually goes into Iraq, and they actually trained Kataib Hezbollah to kill Americans. The Iranians are the ones that taught them how to not just make IEDs, insurgents how to make IEDs, but more specifically IEPs, which is improvised explosive projectiles. Think of an anti-tank missile, but in an IED form. It's a shaped charge that they were trained to puncture American armor to kill the personnel inside. That's something that was taught to them by Iranian RGC forces. You also see those fighters moving into Syria as well and directly combating and training other groups to combat coalition forces and coalition-backed forces. They're the ones that really... That's why we killed Qassam Soleimani when he came to Baghdad, because he was planning on finally overrunning, using Kataib Hezbollah, finally overrunning the U.S. Embassy there about the times of the protests. That's why all of them were there. Most of them were members of Kataib Hezbollah, and there were individuals that were in fact armed, but neither us nor them fired at each other with anything but non-lethal ammunition. So that's kind of the situation with Iran. That's kind of, we would have to go to war with them. They're constantly trying to spread their influence. Neither side likes each other, but a war in Iran would be pretty terrible, no matter how you want to cut it, just because of the terrain and the geography. And it's not something, Iran's just going to be an asshole, but they're pretty isolated. So, moving on from that, we jump down here to Angola. If you don't know, Angola had presidential elections starting officially, I believe, yesterday. So it's a very close race, and it's a very important political race. Right now, what's happening is that here in Angola, about 97% of the votes have been counted and during this political election, and it has a record turnout. There's never been an election this large in the country's history. Right now, the incumbent party, or the People's Movement for Liberation of Angola, the MPLA, is set to once again continue its 50-year streak of political control. The MPLA government have been considered conducting a lot of also like war crimes and crimes against humanity inside their own borders by the international community before. I haven't read too much into it, but my understanding is in general they're not very good. It's kind of like a dictatorship once again, and so they've been in charge of the country for about 50 years, and their streak seems to be continuing as they just barely have pulled ahead. And as of right now, the preliminary results against the UNITA party is that the MPLA have 51% of the vote, while UNITA has 44% of the vote. The tensions on these two sides is rising quite significantly. The leading member of UNITA, which is the opposing faction, the opposing political faction within Angola, Anastasio Rubens Sacado, has urged that the voters that voted for his party to remain calm and peaceful, because there's a threat that violence may break out between these two groups should the MPLA actually end up winning. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's a very tense situation. It's a very close race between these two, and there's been a very big political shift within this country that could be quickly leading into a crisis. Jump up here to Canada as we move over here into North America. And that's because Canada has announced the release of 5 turbines for the for what appears to be Nord Stream 1 after German Chancellor Scholz's visit to the nation. Though Russia claims it's not going to be for the Nord Stream, it's very clear why Germany wanted them back. And we can actually go to Politico over here, which covers a lot of these politics stuff. I'm sure I don't care. And that's one of those turbines that they're talking about. This is for the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And they were being repaired here in Canada. Canada has actually agreed to this to make these turbines an exception to sanctions. Russia's Gazprom stated, quote, there are no turbines being repaired in Canada currently. And this is from their official, this is coming from their official Telegram account. Let's jump down here into North America, or into the United States, where here at Brighton Beach Corner It's been co-named, so it's going to have two names, to Ukrainian Way. In solidarity with the anniversary of Ukraine's independence yesterday, and the 6-month anniversary since the start of the war, the corner of Brighton Beach Avenue and Coney Island Avenue has also been co-named Ukrainian Way. Co-naming was proposed by Councilwoman Ina Vernikov, who was born in Ukraine and represents the 48th district in Brooklyn, which includes that corner. So it's pretty cool. They have new sign and everything. I just thought it was a little happy thing. You can see Brighton Beach Avenue, Ukraine, also known as Ukrainian Way. Pretty cool. And with that, we can start getting into some more uplifting stuff and some more interesting stuff than kind of the dark and depressing topics that we cover. We try and end this on a good note every single night, and that's what we have here. The first thing is actually down here in near Fort Worth, Texas. And it's the fact that dinosaur footprints have been revealed. So droughts within the southwest of the United States have been quite significant. In fact, there's quite heavy impact on places such as Lake Mead, and there has been some water restrictions in many places. But there's other things that are happening because of this. For instance, the drought has revealed 113 million year old dinosaur footprints here in Texas that were previously completely undiscovered. And of course, there's an ad for this.
From the marker.
Nope, we're not gonna. I don't care. I own a Sharpie pen. I don't need a Sharpie pen. I already own them. Please skip. That is wild. There's also areas in the world where you can find ancient footprints too from ancient human beings, which is also really cool. I also love dinosaurs, so we figured we might as well throw that one in. You go over here. A broken fortress has been discovered under a burial mound here in Cyprus. Archaeologists excavating an enormous ancient burial mound in Cyprus uncovered an even older structure hidden beneath it, a rampart or part of a defensive wall. The large mound was known as the Tumulus of Laona. It is roughly 328 feet long by 196 feet wide, or 100 meters by 60 meters. It was likely built around the 3rd century BC, when the successors of Alexander the Great were fighting for control of Cyprus. Ancient people on Cyprus buried the fortress wall under about 484,000 cubic feet, or 13,700 cubic meters of loose soil with sand, silt, and clay, known as marl or red clay. The Laona fortress was therefore well preserved under the tumulus. Its northeastern corner survives at a height of 20 feet or 6 meters, making it one of the most significant monuments of the age of the Cypriot kingdoms. So that is the burial mound. And it has a fortress underneath it, which is pretty cool. And the fact that it links with Alexander the Great is even cooler, because Alexander the Great is probably one of the greatest tacticians ever in history. And finally, we kind of have it's not quite a follow-up, but it is a follow-up. It's pretty cool. So if you may remember before we had a break, by the way, JL made an amazing comment regarding the dinosaur, footprints. He said that had to be a big chicken. The closest living relative to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, by the way, in this day and age, is the mighty chicken. But anyway, moving on from that. Yes, Riley, it's almost like he was nicknamed Alexander the Great. I couldn't imagine why. Can't imagine why. Anyway, moving on. But with this follow-up, so before we took a break, one of the things that we had reported on is the fact that people had literally created mice. They had created mice with no sperm and no egg. They grew them, quite literally, they just built them with DNA that they put together in a lab. It's crazy. It's literally just it's literally creating life. Playing God on a level. It's crazy that this can happen. Because it opens the doors for so many things. Well, we have an update, kind of, regarding some of these lab, I don't know if you say built, grown, I don't know what you say when it comes to this. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a new territory. Conceived, created mice, these lab created mice. And that's the fact that their embryos have grown brains and they now have beating hearts. The lab-made embryos, crafted without any eggs or sperm and incubated in a device that resembles a fast-spinning Ferris wheel full of tiny glass vials, has survived for 8.5 days. That's nearly half the length of a typical mouse pregnancy. In that time, a yolk sac developed around the embryos to supply nutrition, and the embryos themselves developed digestive tracts, neural tubes, or the beginnings of the central nervous system, beating hearts and brains with well-defined subsections, including the forebrain and midbrain. And the new work produced very similar results as an earlier study, which was led by Jacob Hanna at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. Although the two recent studies produced similar embryos, the experiment started out slightly differently. In both studies, the resulting synthetic embryos closely resembled natural embryos, albeit with some slight differences and defects in how the tissues self-organized. However, in both experiments, a very low portion of the stem cells actually gave rise to embryos, suggesting that the efficiency of both systems could be improved. And there you go. Those are some new scans of these lab-grown mice. Yeah, these are different researchers. The first one was from Israel, and these other ones, they're from Cambridge and Pasadena. But yeah, I mean, they got beating hearts, they got brains, they got neural tubes, they have digestive tracts. Like, it's working. Not only did they do it, but it's working. This has so many impacts, it's insane to think about. Being able to create life out of just a little bit of DNA, just being able to organize DNA in the fashion that you would like, and then creating life out of it is insane. The impacts are almost inconceivable. This is how things leading to genetic changes in someone's makeup. This is how gene splicing becomes a thing. This is how, you want a child and you want certain traits in a child. It starts with stuff like this and leads it to that. It's insane. You could literally create the perfect. This is how the idea of creating the perfect human being comes into existence. It's this kind of experiment. It's this kind of thing to create something, to create life in a laboratory in a test tube. Now, this means a lot of things. It means that you could create life that has extreme resilience against things, that makes it healthier, a healthier organism, has healthier traits. And can do a lot of amazing things, and could also allow for cancer to not be a thing. It could help cure cancer. It could help just to make it so that humans don't develop cancer in general. There's a lot of cool ways that this could go. It starts small. It's a project that starts very teeny tiny, but it's a huge jump. It's a huge jump in medicine and in science and in everything else. Yeah, Ervis Ching probably puts it best, though, I think. And he says, tough challenge for the ethics folks. Yeah. Is this ethical? That's a big question. You know, how far should we and could we push this? But only time will tell. Hopefully it will all be for good reasons and all for good things and to further, you know, develop humanity and science. But that's actually it for everything in the world today. We covered quite a bit of news. There's quite a bit of stuff ongoing throughout the world and inside of Ukraine especially. A lot of it, though, is pretty terrible. Even though we like to end on a good note and try and be uplifting here, we didn't, you know, a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, the stuff that makes the news usually isn't good. And the thing is that you guys can help. So you guys allow us as the community to be that news that gives back. And I'm actually going to wipe myself out here. So you guys as the community allow us to be the news that gives back. The way that you guys do this is by, you know, helping us grow, and even more so by checking out the description. We are never doing super chats on this channel. I've made that very clear, and we've made it very clear. It's something that all of the staff have agreed on. That we're never doing this for profit. We don't think that profiting off of human suffering is a good thing. We think, you know, war profiteering, you know, taking money for reporting on the wars and the death and the famine is just a terrible thing. And we want to do this all for charity. And if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different charities. So many that we can't even put descriptions with most of them. You guys have been awesome in supporting these organizations, and you guys keep them coming. Please, if you have another one, please get onto our Discord. The link's also in the description, and send a link to us and give us a short summary. We want to start vetting these things. We vet them for two things. One, of course, we want to make sure that they're legitimate, that they're safe for you, and that they are, you know, that they're, we can kind of go through some financial history with them for the most part and be able to tell you kind of what they're able to do. The second is we go through that financial history to make sure that 80% or more of all of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs and to helping people. 20% or less in most cases actually goes to like salaries and administration's costs. We're here to help people not pay for, you know, not pay for people's salaries. And another thing is that if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then help us grow this channel. The more people that come here and see the project, of course, they get an independent source of news. You know, if you guys like the way we do things, if you find this stuff knowledgeable, then please help us and support us in growing this. The more people that are here, the more of an impact as a community we will have on people's lives throughout the world. And that's really what this is about. We want to help people. We want to do good. We want to report on the news. We want to keep you informed. We want to give you, you know, what's happening and keep you up to date with what's happening throughout the world, in a knowledgeable and, you know, professional way. But we want to help people while doing it, and we want to give back directly to the news we're talking about. So, thank you guys so much for the support that you've already given us. Let your friends know about us. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. It helps us with the algorithm. You know, comment on videos. You know, join us on our Discord. It's a very active and very knowledgeable and very cool community. It's been an awesome thing that you guys have developed. And I can't thank you guys enough for the support you've already given us, and even more so the organizations below. So, yeah, I really can't. It's been amazing. I never thought we would get this far. It's awesome. But thank you guys very much. Please make sure to give a hand to the staff. They're the ones that really make this thing happen. I simply, give my voice to this and put points on a map. They're the ones that are researching. They've done an amazing job so far. They've worked very tirelessly. It's been amazing. So please be sure to give them your round of applause. Give them a hand. And we hope to see you back tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Central. Congratulations, guys. You have officially made it to Friday. I hope that you guys enjoy and be safe on the end of your week. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. I really don't want any of the viewers suffering through any of the stuff that we're reporting on. I don't want you to be a statistic. But thank you very much. I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow. My name is Paul from the New News. Have a fantastic rest of your night. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стояду волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. I will come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.